The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the quiet of the late afternoon. Karen Thompson peeked through her living room window, clutching her coffee mug with the same tightness she reserved for her judgments. A black SUV had just pulled into the driveway across the street, a house she believed had been vacant for months. The vehicle looked expensive, its windows tinted, its driver invisible. Her lips tightened. "Not in my neighborhood," she muttered under her breath. Karen lived in a suburb where people waved from manicured lawns and every stranger felt like a threat. She had grown comfortable with the illusion that she was protecting something, her peace, her safety, her version of order. She didn't hate anyone, she often said, she just liked to be cautious. That afternoon, her caution would change two lives forever. The man stepped out of the SUV, tall, in a gray suit. His skin was a warm brown, his hair close cropped, his posture steady. He looked like someone who knew exactly where he was supposed to be. Karen frowned, unsure why she felt uneasy. Maybe it was because he didn't glance around nervously like most strangers. He walked straight to the front door and unlocked it. She froze. Unlocked it? How did he have a key? Her heart raced. That can't be right, she whispered. Her mind filled with stories from the news, break-ins, scams, dangerous men pretending to belong. She told herself she wasn't prejudiced, she was just being careful. Still, her hands trembled as she dialed 911. "Yes," she told the operator, "I think someone's breaking into my neighbor's house. He doesn't look like he belongs here." The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing across the quiet cul-de-sac. Karen watched from behind her curtains, pulse pounding with a strange mix of fear and righteousness. She saw the man step outside calmly as officers approached. Voices rose, though she couldn't hear the words. Then, he smiled. Actually smiled. One officer shook his hand. Another nodded respectfully. Confused, Karen squinted as one of the policemen gestured toward her house. A knock echoed on her door. She opened it, trying to mask her nerves. "Ma'am," said the officer, his tone patient, "this is Mr. Daniels. He's the new homeowner. Just moved in today." Karen's cheeks burned. The man met her eyes with calm composure. "Afternoon," he said simply. "Looks like I have quite a welcome party." Her words stumbled. I thought there was no for sale sign." "I didn't know." "It's all right," he said softly. "I understand. You were just trying to be safe." But his eyes lingered a moment too long, and she saw something there, not anger, but disappointment. It stung worse than fury would have. When the officers left, Karen stood frozen by the door, her embarrassment curdling into shame. She had meant no harm, she told herself again, yet she couldn't stop replaying his face, how calm he remained when she'd humiliated him in front of police. Days passed. The house across the street came to life. Curtains appeared, lights glowed, and laughter sometimes drifted through open windows. Karen avoided looking that way. Every morning she felt the sting of her mistake, and every evening she tried to justify it. "I didn't know," she'd whisper into her coffee, but the words felt thinner each time. Then, 3 months later, her world shifted again. Karen worked as a clerk at the county courthouse, a job she'd held for 15 years. She liked the structure, the rules, the sense of fairness, at least, that's what she told herself. On Monday morning, the courthouse buzzed with whispers. New judge starting today, big reputation, fair but firm. She didn't pay much attention until she walked into courtroom 3 and froze. There, behind the bench, adjusting his black robe, with quiet authority, sat Judge Marcus Daniels. Her breath caught. The man from across the street. The same man she'd called the cops on. He looked even more commanding now, poised, confident, but kind-eyed. Karen's knees wobbled. She ducked behind a file cart, praying he wouldn't notice her. He didn't. His focus was on the case before him, his voice steady as he spoke. She watched in awe as he handled each matter with patience, treating even the rudest defendant with dignity. He was everything she wasn't that day: calm, fair, compassionate. By lunch, the weight of guilt pressed too hard to ignore. She returned home that evening and stood by her window again, looking at his house. Lights glowed warmly inside. She thought of knocking, of apologizing, but fear won. She imagined his voice cold, his forgiveness out of reach. So she stayed quiet. Weeks passed. Then fate, perhaps amused by her hesitation, forced her hand. A small claims case landed in her lap, paperwork tangled, and she was summoned to testify about a filing error. The presiding judge, Marcus Daniels. Karen sat trembling in the courtroom, palms sweating. When her name was called, she stood, heart pounding. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his tone polite but unreadable. "Please take the stand." She did, her voice shaky as she answered procedural questions. Then came a pause. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered across his face, subtle but unmistakable. A faint smile touched his lips, gentle, not mocking. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. After the session ended, he approached her quietly near the corridor. "Ms. Thompson," he said, lowering his voice. "You live on Oak Ridge, right? Across the street from me." "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. He nodded. "I thought so. Don't worry. I don't hold grudges." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "I'm so sorry," she blurted. "That day, I wasn't thinking. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now it was wrong. I judged you without knowing anything." Her voice cracked. "I embarrassed you. I can't stop thinking about it." He studied her, his gaze calm, not cold. "You know," he said after a long pause, "we all make judgments. Some out of fear, some out of habit. The important thing is what we do after we realize we were wrong." She looked up, confused. "And what do you do, after something like that?" His smile deepened, kind but firm. "You make it right, in small ways, every day." That night, Karen couldn't sleep. His words replayed over and over. Make it right. She thought about the immigrant family who moved in down the street last month, how she'd avoided them out of awkwardness. The next morning, she baked muffins and knocked on their door. The mother answered cautiously, but Karen smiled warmly. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said. It wasn't much, but it felt like a beginning. Over the next weeks, something in Karen changed. She started attending community events she used to ignore. She volunteered at the local food drive, helped tutor kids at the library, and made an effort to listen before assuming. People began to notice. The woman once known for complaints and suspicion was now the one offering rides, organizing block parties, checking on elderly neighbors. Even Marcus noticed. One Saturday morning, as he mowed his lawn, she waved shyly from across the street. This time, he waved back, genuinely. Months later, their paths crossed again in court, but under different circumstances. Karen had joined a neighborhood outreach group that was advocating for better resources for families facing eviction. They'd filed a petition for funding, and Judge Daniels was overseeing the case. When she took the stand to represent her group, her voice was steady, filled with purpose. She spoke about second chances, about how communities heal when people choose compassion over suspicion. Judge Daniels listened quietly, nodding at intervals. When she finished, his tone was warm. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Your testimony shows the power of growth and accountability." After the session, as everyone began to leave, he caught her eye again. "You've come a long way," he said softly. Karen smiled, tears glistening. "You were right," she replied. "We can always make it right. Sometimes it just takes someone showing us how." He nodded, then looked around the busy hallway where lawyers, defendants, and clerks rushed past each other, each with their own fears, biases, and battles. "Justice," he said quietly, almost to himself, "isn't just about laws. It's about empathy." The words stayed with her long after. That evening, Karen stood outside under the golden sunset, watching kids play on the sidewalks she once guarded like borders. She thought about the man she had once feared, the man who could have humiliated her in return but chose grace instead. His kindness had changed her more than punishment ever could. Time passed. Their friendship grew naturally, respectful, quiet, rooted in mutual understanding. During neighborhood gatherings, they'd often exchange knowing smiles. Karen became known for her warmth, not her worry. And sometimes, when new neighbors moved in, she'd be the first to knock on their door with a plate of cookies and a simple, heartfelt welcome. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight bathed the street in gold, Marcus walked over holding 2 cups of coffee. "Peace offering," he said with a grin. Karen laughed. "I think we've both made enough peace offerings to last a lifetime." He nodded, looking around at the calm street, the laughter of children echoing between houses. "You know," he said, "if everyone in this town learned what you did, my courtroom would be a lot quieter." She smiled. "Then I guess that's a goal worth working toward." They stood there in comfortable silence, the kind that needed no apology, no explanation. Two people, once divided by fear, now united by understanding. Karen looked across the street where her old self had once stood behind a curtain, suspicious and small. She whispered, almost to herself, "We really can change, can't we?" Marcus glanced at her and replied, "We just have to be willing to see the truth before it's too late." The breeze carried the scent of jasmine, the hum of crickets rising. In that moment, the world felt a little softer, a little kinder. And somewhere deep inside, Karen finally forgave herself. Not because he demanded it, but because he had shown her what grace truly meant. From that day forward, she lived differently. She stopped assuming, started listening, and learned to see people for who they were rather than who she feared they might be. In doing so, she found something she hadn't known she'd lost, a sense of peace, of belonging, of humanity. Years later, when Judge Daniels retired, the town honored him with a quiet ceremony. Karen sat in the front row, smiling through tears as he spoke about justice, compassion, and community. When he thanked those who had taught him just as much as he'd ever taught them, his eyes briefly found hers in the crowd. She nodded, understanding completely. The room rose in applause, and for a moment, Karen felt that everything in her life, the mistakes, the shame, the growth, had led to this, a chance to be better, to make things right, to live with open eyes and an open heart. Because sometimes, the greatest justice isn't found in a courtroom, it's found in the quiet redemption of an ordinary soul learning to love ag.